Welcome to the Am I Hunting podcast. And with spring here and leading into summer, it's really starting to feel like this calm before the storm. All right, welcome to the Am I Hunting podcast, and thank you for listening. So this episode is really not going to touch on too deep of topics or get into really any deep conversation. I really just want to do this one as I'm looking at my schedule and what I need to get done over the next few weeks. And it's going from where I'm kind of in a standstill, where there's not a lot going on. It's really just kind of looking ahead to what needs to be done over the next month and a half, really. And it looks like that schedule is filling up pretty quickly. But before we really get into, things that are up and coming, I do want to touch base on a couple of things from this past weekend. Now, I did mention on a previous episode that, there's a couple of events that I had highlighted. Now, I did attend both those. So the first one was a turkey hunting seminar that was put on by the Midwest Michigan branch, or NDA branch, and that was put on by Andrew Millard. If you remember him, he was with Iron Way, and he does habitat improvement and consultant and that type of work. So it's really nice to be able to meet up with him. I also ran into a longtime friend of mine who I really hadn't seen in several years, really. I got to touch base with him, and it was really good just kind of sitting down and, learn a little bit more about turkey hunting and, getting some perspective of other hunters that, how they approach it, what their questions are, and really gave you, some perspective on things to think about. You can sometimes get stuck in your own ways, in your own head of how you want to do things or your own thought process. It's really great to be able to hear some perspective from other hunters out there. And then the other one was the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, the Traverse City chapter. They had their annual banquet. That was an absolute blast, really. It was really one of my first ever real, large banquet. And, I felt a little out of place when I first got there. Especially having, no real history with ever elk hunting or anything like that, and not knowing a ton about elk and elk hunting in that realm anyways. But everyone was great to talk to. There's a lot of people that attended, a lot of passionate hunters and people that really just came out to have a good time and to support a good cause and raise some money for the organization. So they had some really great food. Again, they had tons of raffles and auctions and whatnot that you could really partake in. And there was a lot of people that won a lot of great prizes. I myself took part in the live auction. My wife Kim, she, had a couple items that we both kind of had our eyeballs on. And, ultimately the bidding got above our price range for some of the items. So did a couple bids on a few items, but quickly got outbid. But I ended up on the very last item of the night, ended up winning the auction for a new saddle. So in that saddle was from Tubor, and it's I did a little bit different style of saddle than I had previously purchased with Latitude Outdoors, and a little bit different styling, a little bit different fit, and everything like that. One of the owners was there at the banquet, and he is a local guy, basically a couple towns over, not too far away from me. So it's really cool to, get that item and have it be from a local guy. So we actually, probably here in the near future, will meet up and, he'll give me some more tips and pointers of, how he goes about with his saddle hunting. Because he's certainly been doing it a lot longer than I have, along with another co-owner. And we'll sit down and really just talk saddle hunting and hunting in general, especially here in Northwest Lower Michigan here, which will be a great time. And always fun to be able to sit around and talk hunting with people. So that will be certainly an upcoming episode highlighting their product and just, like I said, talk hunting really. So I have to pause real quick because I forgot to mention another event that is coming up this Saturday, April 16th. It's the Trek Light release with Trekin Outdoors at the Upper Hand Brewery in Escanaba, Michigan. It was another one of those events that, is a great way to meet up with fellow outdoorsmen and have a good time, talk hunting, talk fishing, whatever, really, and just have a good time. It's really interesting that they, partnered up with a brewery and ended up with their own beer for the Trekin Outdoors team. So I did want to mention that, and I hope if anyone's in the area or willing to take the trip up there, I hope to see you there. That's it for the update, and let's get back into it. So let's dive into what's coming up in the next few weeks. Certainly here within the next, week and a half or so, turkey season opens up here in Michigan, which will open up the 23rd. So if you're a turkey hunter, you've got that to look forward to in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, if you're planning on going out, you've done some prep work, you've been able to scout, get your gear in line, make sure that you've patterned your shotgun if you're using that, or been practicing with your bow if you're going to utilize that. Hopefully, especially if you have one of the earlier seasons that you've scouted out your areas, you got a pretty good idea of where the turkeys are roosting, where they're going to be going to strut, their travel corridors, that type of thing. At least start to be getting out there more and more to be able to locate different turkey groups and have a game plan in mind of how you're going to intercept these turkeys. Especially if it's an area that you've hunted before, then you kind of have that historical data that you can rely on as well. But certainly make sure that you focus in on where the turkeys are in the moment as well. I ran into that last year where I had scouted, found a ton of turkey sign, found where the turkeys were, and then a week later when it came time to the season that I had available, showed up and the turkeys were gone. They had absolutely vanished. So within that week's time, there was tons of turkey sign to there was no sign of turkeys. So make sure that you're paying attention to that, because things could change quite rapidly as the weeks progress. And then as well, as part of getting that gear together, if you haven't in a while, start practicing with your turkey calls. Get proficient with that again. Whether you need to get some new calls. So if you've got some old diaphragm calls that have been left in their containers and they're getting old and nasty and dried out and musty, maybe it's time to pick up some new ones. Start prepping your slate calls, your box calls, making sure that they're in good working order and they're ready to go. And like I said, start practicing with those calls, because the last thing you want to do is get out there and start trying to call and sounding terrible because you're out of practice. So in this year, I honestly wasn't too eager to go out turkey hunting this year. I really wanted to focus more on fishing. But my oldest daughter, who has been kind of wishy-washy on wanting to go hunting, I've offered to take her out hunting before. She's been kind of interested in it, but really, she's not really on board with it, at least for deer hunting anyways. Really her thing right now is she really can't really hunt for anything that's really cute. So, deer are out of the question. Squirrels are out of the question. Having this conversation with her, she said, yeah, turkeys aren't cute. They're ugly. And I even said it bluntly to her, basically, that you would be okay with shooting a turkey in the face. And she says, yeah, I'm okay with shooting a turkey in the face. So, I do have a 20 gauge that, and I had tried having my daughter shoot a couple years back, and it just seemed like it was a little bit too big of a gun for them. Their grandpa, my dad, he ended up buying a 410, so we're going to take that out, let my oldest daughter get some practice with it, and we're going to try our luck at doing some turkey hunting here for the season that opens up in May there. Give us plenty of time to be able to try to find some birds and give her an opportunity to see if we can't harvest one. And then again, in the next few weeks, a lot of the fishing is going to be opening up and starting to ramp up as well. Right now, the steelhead, depending on where you're at, people are getting into some steelhead. Here, it seems like it's still a little snow. We're a little slow being up here a little bit further north. But in the next few weeks, that should be starting to ramp up as well. More and more fish will start piling into the rivers, and that fishing should get pretty good. And then at the end of the month here, the trout season is going to open up for being able to harvest trout, as well as even pike. And a lot of those lakes that are still a little ice covered are going to really open up, so you can go back to fishing out on the lakes. So that's one thing I'm going to put more focus on this spring, is probably with the fishing. I've gone out a couple times so far trying to do some steelhead fishing. It's been pretty slow, haven't had any bites. But really, this is really my first year of really ever trying to do any significant river fishing. So I'm just taking advantage of the slow time, getting used to the equipment and the techniques, and really just kind of learn how to navigate the river and find particular holes, how to fish them a little bit. So kind of learning what's a good plan, what's not. So, some of the, one of the rivers I went to is quite flooded. So it's been hard to get to some of the holes to be able to try fish. So, it's one of those things that, do I just try to wade out there or wade along the shoreline and fish the holes I can? Or is it time to bust out the boat and be able to get into those holes I can't really cast to or can't really walk to anymore? That's some things to looking into in the future. Putting more effort into, trying to fish the river, really. So in this month as well, been getting the bow out, shooting it, and starting my summer routine of, getting into my practice routine. I've talked about this a little bit before, but really I like to start out every year. I start out at 20 yards, usually this time of the month, and every month I start backing up more and more and more. And the idea is by time hunting season comes along that I'm able to shoot twice the distance of what I'd really feel comfortable with shooting at a deer. So really, that's ideally, for me, it's 30 yards and in. But again, certainly at that point with practicing, I'm looking at feeling comfortable or being proficient at shooting at 60 yards. If I'm feeling good and shooting at 60 yards with a nice tight group and I'm consistently hitting, then I know at 30, then that should be a pretty easy shot to make and be consistent with it. And then also with practicing with the bow, now's the time where it starts ramping up to where I'm looking into making sure that I've got plenty of arrows. So I'm looking at picking up some more arrows, making sure they're still tuned properly, getting some new ones fletched, exactly what broadheads I want for the year, if I'm going to use the same ones I did last year or try something new or go back to something I'd used in the past. As well as looking into making sure that, the string is still good. After hunting season, it could be gotten beat up quite a bit. Make sure that it's in good working order before we start really slinging arrows. And then really just looking at doing some upgrades on it. On my bow particularly, I was looking at getting the new Prime inline, but it looks like that's not going to happen this year. So I might look into doing a couple upgrades on some of the accessories on my bow. I had considered looking into getting a sidebar or a back bar for my bow, because I do like to shoot with the quiver on my bow, just for being able to keep everything together. If I'm doing any type of run and gun or ground still hunting or anything like that, I like to have everything right on the bow and ready to go. But with having that quiver on with the arrows, it does cause a little bit of counterbalance issues. So you're going to look into potentially adding something like that to just help stabilize that bow, help slow down that oscillation, or help balance it out to where I can make sure it's level a little bit easier. So it's adding some of those mechanical advantages to being able to help improve your accuracy with the bow. That's going to help you when it comes time to proper form and shot execution, as well as help keep those shot groups smaller by making sure that the mechanical aspect of it is solid, and then you have the biggest variable is just the human element and not all the other mechanical factors that could be causing that bow to not shoot properly or causing those groups essentially to open up and have inconsistencies. So I might be looking into a new rest, new stabilizer, and might even look into a new site as well. And then once we get into early to mid-May, then it's going to become time to plant my spring/summer cover crop. Now this is something that I started really last year, and that's to essentially basically to work on the soil health and to help keep, basically make it to where I can have, a little bit better success when it comes to my fall plot. Utilizing the technique that I do, I basically put down that spring cover crop. It provides some food, adds nutrients to the soil, adds more organic matter. And then when it comes time to plant my fall crop, I can put down my fall seed, terminate, lay all that summertime plants on top of it, act like a mulch layer. And then by having a diverse blend in there, it can help increase some potential nutrients. So comes to fall time, I'm using less fertilizer. Helps keep down the weed growth. I can use less herbicide in the long run as well. And then some of it around the borders especially, I will let it grow up, let some of those plants seed out, create grain, and I can use that as a nursery crop as the fall green plot starts to come up, to where that helps not being overbrowsed. I did see that was a bit of a benefit last year, where some of the plants that I had left up that started maturing, those plants really got hammered before the greens really did. So it just helps those plants not get overbrowsed too early. And I think it really paid off in helping make sure that my fall food plot was a bit more successful in that regard. And then also it comes time to doing some additional habitat work. So, down at the farm, there is quite a bit of autumn olive and bush honeysuckle. Some of the areas have gotten so thick that's starting to get pretty rank, to where it's really taken over the area. So we're going to go through and remove some of those invasive plants to allow for a little bit better diversity in some areas. Also going to do some edge feathering on primarily my main food plot. Some of the brush and trees and bushes and everything that have really grown up and start encroaching onto the field. So I'm going to go through, cut some of that back, set back that field edge a little bit, to where that field, doesn't start getting overran with, basically the wood line. So we're going to be busting out the chainsaw, doing some chainsaw work. Also got another property that is a very small property, it's about 10 acre spot as well. Going to do some more work on that to try to develop that as well. Plan on doing another episode really diving into exactly how I'm going to approach that small parcel to try to get the most out of it with a limited amount of acreage. But that'll be for another time. But that's really the start of things to come in the next few weeks. Now, certainly those are some of the main things that have come up in my mind really in a few weeks I've been thinking about. But I know there's more to be done, because it really feels like this is the time to get a plan in place to be able to start ramping up as the spring continues and as we lead into summer, because it's one of those things that it's going to be fall before we know it, and you're going to look back and wonder where all the time went, and that you didn't get done as much as that you had hoped for the year. So there's a good little friendly reminder to get your plan in place, get your ducks in a row, and start preparing for the things to come. Because again, fall will be here before we know it. So and with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. And as always, get out there, be safe, and have fun.